He
What would you
actually
do if
thinks
you
we'll
walked
approve
into a
this
room where
joke of a
everyone already
proposal.
decided who you are?
You can
Before
laugh,
you even
gentlemen,
said your
but my
name,
proposal
would you
just
smile and
rendered
try
yours
to fit in?
completely
Or would you
irrelevant.
quietly take a seat and pretend their stares don't burn your skin? This is the story of Ayan Mishra, a boy from a dusty town in Uttar Pradesh who thought he was just coming to Mumbai for a 6-month internship. But he had no idea he was about to walk straight into a world where your surname and your English decide whether people pour you chai or make you feel like dirt under their shoes. I used to think office politics was just about who gets promotion and who doesn't. But then I saw how someone can be fired, promoted, humiliated or respected, just by the way they enter a room on their first day. On that morning, Mumbai was doing what Mumbai always does, honking, rushing, sweating. Ayan stood outside the glass building of Shakti Line Logistics, clutching a simple black backpack that still smelled faintly of the agarbatti his mother burned when she folded his shirt the night before. She had only ironed that one light blue shirt 3 times to make sure not a single crease remained. Muttering, "Beta, they may not know your name, but at least let them see you are serious." His father, with his permanently taped knuckles and old boxer's shoulders, had tied Ayan's wristwatch himself and said quietly, "Remember, ring ho ya office. असली लड़ाई हमेशा अपने अंदर होती है. The real fight is always inside." Ayan had laughed it off. But those words were still echoing in his head as he watched men in crisp white shirts and women with leather laptops walk past him into the lobby like they belonged to another planet. The moment he stepped into the open plan office on the 5th floor, conversations dipped just a little. Not enough to be polite. Just enough to make him feel it. A row of MacBooks, branded water bottles, people speaking in fast English, sliding in bits of Hindi only to make a joke. Ayan introduced himself to the receptionist, stumbling slightly over, business analytics intern, his accent dragging a bit on the English words. She didn't even look up fully, just pointed to a corner desk near the window and said, "You are the scholarship guy, right? You can sit there. Kabir sir will come." Scholarship guy, not Ayan, not analyst, just the village boy charity case, in one sentence. When Kabir Khanna finally walked in, everything about him said, "I own this place even if my name is not on the board outside." Slim fit shirt, expensive watch, hair styled like he had time to think about it. He didn't rush to his chair, he let people notice that he had arrived. He scanned the room the way some people scan a menu, deciding what he feels like playing with today. His eyes landed on Ayan, who had already opened his company laptop and was trying to log in. There was a half-second pause. Then that little smirk people in cities have perfected over years of looking down on someone without ever saying it out loud. "So," Kabir said in smooth English, loud enough for the nearest desks to hear, "this is our famous, rising from the villages scholarship intern. Welcome to Shakti Line. Yaar, big city, big dreams, huh?" A few people chuckled, one girl, Ria, added under her breath, "Hope he knows how to use Excel at least. Not just tactors." They thought he couldn't hear. But of course he did. In small towns you learn to hear everything people don't say to your face. Ayan swallowed, but he didn't answer. He just nodded, "Good morning, sir," in careful English and went back to his screen. It wasn't that he was shy. He had simply learned long ago that in spaces like this, every word from someone like him could be twisted into a joke later. The worst part wasn't the sentence, it was the way the whole room subtly rearranged itself around him. People who had been laughing loudly moments ago started doing that thing where they look at you, then glance at your shoes, your shirt, your skin tone, then back at their screen as if to say, "Okay, we've placed you in our mental list now." To them, he was just another UP wala who got lucky with some Go-type scholarship. What they didn't see was the spreadsheet half hidden behind the company login page. The one Ayan had been working on all night at the cheap PG in Andheri, while his roommates snored on thin mattresses. It was a rough model of Shakti Line's current delivery routes that he had already downloaded from a public tender document and started cleaning. Out of pure habit, numbers calmed him in a way people never did. As Kabir walked away, cracking another joke about quota hires to a colleague, Ayan's fingers hovered over the keyboard for a second. He felt that familiar burn in his chest, the mix of shame and stubbornness. For a moment, he almost closed the file and told himself, "Bus, Sirf 6 months. Keep your head down. Get your certificate. Go back. But then he remembered his father's voice and his mother's hands shaking slightly as she pinned his name tag inside his shirt. The office air felt colder than the Mumbai monsoon rain outside. And yet, somewhere deep inside, a quiet thought rose up. If they have already decided I am less, then I have nothing to lose by being more. That evening, when most people had left and the coffee machine had stopped whirring, the security guard, old Iqbal Chacha, noticed Ayan still staring at his screen near the window. He walked over with 2 small paper cups of overly sweet chai and said, "Beta, first day and already doing overtime? Careful, these big people like free hard work." Ayan smiled for the first time that day, took the chai, and simply replied, "It's okay, Chacha. They don't have to see everything I'm working on. Not yet." He closed one window on his laptop, leaving only a blank dashboard open for anyone passing by to see. While in the background, rows of numbers and roots began to arrange themselves quietly under his hands. He had arrived in their world feeling like a stranger. They had already written his role in their story. What he didn't know yet was how loudly his unwritten chapter would one day tear their script apart. The funny thing about fancy job titles in India is, half the time they are just new names for very old chores. Business analytics intern sounded big on paper. But within 1 week Ayan realized it mostly meant doing the kind of work nobody else wanted to touch. You know how it is, copying numbers from one broken Excel sheet to another. Cleaning up someone else's messy data. Making slides at midnight so that the real employees can present them in the morning and say, "As per my analysis." Kabir was very smooth about it. He didn't shout or throw files. He would just walk over to Ayan's desk with that same casual authority and say, "Yaar, you're good with numbers, right? Just help me clean this old delivery data. I have bigger things to handle." Or, "Can you make a simple PPT from these points? Nothing major. Just put some graphs. I'll add the strategic parts later." Every time, Ayan would say, "Sure, sir," because what else can a boy on a 6-month internship say? Inside, though, there was that small pinch. Not because of the work itself, he had seen his father load cement bags at dawn. He was not allergic to hard work, but because of the way people around him behaved once they realized he was the village scholarship guy. Ria would lean on the partition and joke, "UP wale log are very good with jugad. No, you'll fix this mess data somehow." Samar would send him emails with subject lines like, "Small favor," and attach files so chaotic that even the computer looked tired. When Ayan asked a simple clarification, Samar would reply, "Arre yaar, basic hai, you'll learn with experience," then laugh with his friends as if they had just watched a comedy show. Nobody directly abused him. That's the sophisticated part of modern cruelty. It's all in tone, in timing, in the way someone smiles at your mistakes and goes silent at your effort. Instead of fighting it, Ayan did what boys from small towns have always done to survive in big cities. He watched. He listened. And he worked twice as hard. He came in before most people, when the office was still half asleep. Cleaning staff wiping glass walls and someone in the pantry boiling the first round of oversweet tea. He would log in, open the old root files, and quietly start doing what nobody else bothered to do, actually understanding why so many deliveries were late. Why drivers were always complaining about impossible schedules. At lunch, while the core team ordered from Swiggy and argued about which new cafe in Bandra had the best coffee, Ayan would take his steel tiffin to the warehouse floor. There, among the smell of diesel and dust and sweat, men with sunburnt necks and cracked nails would sit on upturned crates and eat roti with onion and pickle. At first they were shy. An office boy sitting with them felt strange. But slowly, as he asked small questions in Hindi, "Bhaiya, why does this route always get delayed? Which road has the worst jam?" They opened up. One driver, Satish, showed him on Google Maps. "See, Saab, they make us go like this in the system. But this flyover is always blocked in the evening. If they just let us go through this inner road near Dharavi, we save almost 40 minutes. Ayan started writing these things down, filling page after page in a cheap notebook. At night, back in his cramped PG, while his roommates argued about who had stolen whose phone charger, He would feed those notes into his laptop, adjusting his algorithm, changing weights, testing new sequences. It was boring to anyone else, but for him it felt like stitching together a map of the city's veins. The more he worked, the clearer one thing became: the system was not failing because the city was too chaotic. It was failing because nobody in the air-conditioned part of the building bothered to listen to the people sweating in the loading bay. One evening, this gap between the two worlds exploded in front of his eyes. It was close to 8 p.m., the time when the office staff had mostly gone home but the last trucks were still being loaded. Ayan was in the corner of the warehouse with Satish, checking a test route on his laptop, when he heard voices rise near the main shutter. Vikram, the gym-built supervisor who loved shouting more than speaking, was standing chest to chest with an older driver, Malik uncle, who had been with Shakti line since before Kabir finished school. Every day you have some excuse. Nah, jam here, police there. Array, if you can't drive in Mumbai traffic, go retire in your village. Vikram barked, jabbing a finger into Malik's shoulder. Malik uncle tried to explain. Wo sign signal pay, but Vikram cut him off, grabbing the front of his faded shirt. Enough. One more delay and I'll see to it you're gone. There are 100 boys waiting outside for this job. You know that moment when your body moves before your brain fully catches up? Ayan felt his legs carry him forward before he had time to think about Kabir or HR or his precious internship letter. He heard his own voice, quieter than Vikram's but somehow sharper. Leave him, bhai. He's older than your father. If you have problem, shout at the system, not at his collar. For a heartbeat, the whole bay went silent. Even the beeping of a reversing truck seemed to pause. Vikram turned slowly, eyes narrowing as if a mosquito had dared to bite him. And you are who? He asked, stepping closer, breath hot with anger and cheap energy drink. New intern is giving me lecture now? For a second, Ayan regretted opening his mouth. He knew how the story usually ends for people like him. But when Vikram suddenly lunged, his hand shooting out to grab Ayan's shirt the way he had grabbed Malik's, something old and deeply trained kicked in. Ayan didn't even think, I am going to fight. His body simply remembered long, sweaty evenings in the small town Akhara, his father's palm on his shoulder, the thud of gloves hitting the punching bag. As Vikram's hand came forward, Ayan shifted his weight to the side, his left foot sliding half a step back, his right hand coming up not to punch but to redirect. He caught Vikram's wrist, turned his hips slightly, and used the man's own momentum to send him stumbling into a stack of carton boxes. No dramatic slam, no slow motion movie scene. Just one clumsy crash, a few boxes falling, and Vikram landing on his backside with a sound that made two loaders bite their lips to stop from laughing. Ayan immediately let go, stepping back, hands raised a little, not in victory but in apology. Sorry, bhai. Reflex, he said, heart pounding but voice steady. If I didn't move, both of us would be on the floor. Vikram's face went red, partly from anger, partly from the realization that half the warehouse had seen him fall. For a moment, it looked like he would jump back up and swing. But something in Ayan's eyes, not aggression, not fear, just a calm, steady warning, made him hesitate. He dusted his jeans, spat to the side, and muttered, "Bus, next time remember who is supervisor here," before storming off towards the office door. That night, as Ayan walked back to the station, his hands were still shaking, not from the almost fight, but from the complicated mess of feelings inside. He hated that he had drawn attention to himself. He hated that now people would talk, twist the story into intern attacked supervisor, gossip over chai. But he also hated, more than anything, that men like Malik uncle had to keep swallowing insults just to feed their families. On the platform, while he waited for the 10:12 local, his phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. Good you spoke up, beta. Some people only understand when someone stands between their hand and our neck. He looked up and saw Malik uncle on the opposite platform, lifting his phone slightly in the air with a small smile. Ayan typed back, I only stood there because someone once stood between a fist and my face too. As the train roared in, he thought of his father again, wiping sweat from his brow, saying, strength is not for showing off in the ring. Ayan, It's for the day when someone weaker than you has no one else. Ayan had come to Mumbai promising himself he would keep his head down, do his work, avoid drama, but with every late night in the warehouse, every line of code that made a driver's life a little easier, and every moment like the one with Vikram, that promise was slowly changing. Without even realizing it, the quiet intern from the village was starting to carry more of Shakti line on his shoulders than all the big English titles upstairs combined. Big moments in life almost never announce themselves. They don't come with background music or a flashing sign that says, "Today everything will change." Sometimes they just look like another Monday where you are standing in a conference room holding a printout, wondering if you should sit or stay standing near the wall. That's exactly what it looked like the day Shakti Line had to present its new national logistics strategy to the board and a potential big client from Bangalore. For everyone else, it was Kabir Sir's big presentation. For Ayan, it was the day he had to decide whether he wanted to live quietly in someone else's shadow, or risk everything by stepping into the light. The whole week before, Kabir had been in full hero mode. He was roaming around the office with that extra swag, telling anyone who would listen, "This tender is huge. Yaar, if we crack this, Shakti Line will be in a different league." Every time he walked past Ayan's desk, he would tap the surface and say, "Good work on the data cleaning, Mishra. Without clean data, how will my brains shine?" He said it jokingly, but both of them knew that the slides being made at midnight on Ayan's laptop had Kabir's name on the title and Ayan's fingerprints everywhere else. Ayan kept quiet. He told himself, "It's fine. Yaar, 6 months. Get the experience. Get out. Let him have his glory." But then, late one night, he overheard something in the pantry that twisted his stomach. Ria was telling Samar, Kabir said in the meeting he personally designed the new route algorithm. Years of experience in the field. He said, "Our intern must be feeling very inspired." No, they laughed. And Ayan suddenly saw the future play out, his work, his nights in the PG, his conversations with drivers, all becoming part of Kabir's personal story in front of the board. That's when the first crack appeared in his decision to stay silent. On the day of the presentation, the conference room felt like a stage. Long polished table, small bowls of cashews, bottled water lined up like soldiers. On one side sat the Shakti Line directors, including Kabir's chacha, the founder, a man with silver hair and a tired but sharp gaze. On the other side, the client team from Bangalore, including a woman in a simple cotton sari with a laptop full of sticky notes. She was the store. The kind of person who actually reads code instead of just memorizing buzzwords. Ayan stood at the back, near the glass wall, holding a notepad he didn't need. He was there, just in case Kabir needs tech support. Kabir had said with a wink. Kabir started strong. You have to give him that. The man knew how to talk. He walked them through slides full of neat graphs, heat maps of India, big arrows showing current in red and proposed in green. He spoke about our innovative routing logic and our deep understanding of Indian highways, as if he had personally driven a truck through every pothole in the country. For a while, everyone seemed impressed. Ayan watched his own work dance on the screen and tried to swallow the bitter taste in his mouth. Chalo, at least the company benefits, he told himself. Then the sari-clad store from Bangalore tilted her head, looked at a particular flowchart on the slide, and said slowly, "This optimization pattern, it looks very similar to a public algorithm we have been testing in some of our smaller projects. Something by a developer who goes by the name Veda Root on GitHub. Are you affiliated with that project?" It was such a simple question, but it was like someone had quietly pulled the carpet under Kabir's feet. For a split second, his face froze. Then he laughed too loudly. Yes, we are very aware of latest open source trends," he said, dodging the actual question. "We have our own in-house version, of course." The store didn't smile. "I'm asking because that code is not trivial. We have been trying to contact this Veda Root for months. No response. We wanted to bring them on as a consultant. If your company is truly using that logic, someone here must understand it at a deep level, not just at slide level." Her eyes, behind thin glasses, scanned the room. They did not stop at Kabir. They moved slowly but surely, to the quiet boy at the back whose shoulders had just stiffened. Ayan felt his heart thumping so hard he thought the entire table would hear it. This was the fork in the road. If he kept his mouth shut, Kabir would bluff his way through, maybe stumble, maybe recover, and life would go on. Ayan would remain data boy. If he spoke, he had no idea what would happen. He remembered the night his father came home with his hand wrapped in a white bandage, after losing his last boxing match, and said, "Sometimes losing in front of everyone is better than winning while lying to yourself." Before his fear could drag him back down, Ayan heard his own voice, "Mom, if I may, I can explain that part." The room turned. You know that collective head turn in Indian families when the youngest dares to speak at the dining table? It felt like that, but with more money at stake. Kabir's eyes shot to him, full of warning. "Ayan, it's okay, I'll take this," he said quickly. Smile tight. The store raised her hand gently. No, let him speak," she insisted. "I want to hear from the person who wrote that last SQL block on slide 14. There was no way she could know that, unless she had actually read his code. Ayan stepped forward, palms slightly sweaty, but voice steadier than he expected. "The algorithm you're referring to, Mom, it started as a side project when I was still in Gorakhpur," he said. "I put it online under the name Veda Route because my grandfather used to call the highways Naived, the new scriptures of our time. I didn't think anyone important was looking at it. I just wanted small trucking unions to have something that big companies had." A soft chuckle escaped the older director at the end of the table. Something in that line touched his old school heart. The store opened her laptop, typed quickly, turned the screen slightly towards the board. There, for everyone to see, was the Veda Root repository, same variables, same structure, same logic as the one Shakti line was proudly presenting, and an email ID at the bottom that ended with a small town ISP address and the name, Ayan Mishra. "So you are Veda Root," she said, more statement than question. Ayan nodded. The silence in the room changed texture. A few minutes ago, it had been the polite silence you give to a senior manager. Now it was the heavy silence of people realizing they had been clapping for the wrong person. Kabir tried to recover. We hired him exactly because of this talent," he said quickly. "As you can see, under my guidance he has been able to." The founder finally spoke, his voice calm but carrying a weight that made Kabir flinch. "Kabir, bus, let the boy finish. Then we will talk about guidance." That bus hurt more than any shout could have. It was the first time in a long time someone had drawn a line for Kabir in front of outsiders. Ayan didn't take revenge with words. He simply walked to the screen, asked someone to hand him the clicker, and started explaining the logic in clear, simple terms, how he had weighted night traffic differently in different cities. How he had included informal driver knowledge like, never take this flyover after 6 p.m. How he had built a feedback loop so the system could learn from delays instead of blaming drivers. He spoke like he was back in the warehouse, explaining to Satish Bhai why a certain route would be kinder to his aging knees. As he talked, you could see a shift happen around the table. The store leaned in, genuinely impressed. One of the board members whispered to another, "We've been paying consultants crores for less sophistication than this." The founder kept his eyes on Ayan. But there was now a trace of something softer there, not charity, not guilt, but respect. When Ayan finished, the store closed her laptop and said, "Our condition for this contract is simple. We want this algorithm, and we want the person who built it to be part of the core project team. Non-negotiable." She didn't even look at Kabir when she said, "person who built it." She looked straight at Ayan. The meeting ended with polite handshakes and corporate phrases. But underneath, something fundamental had cracked. In the corridor, people who usually barely greeted Ayan now looked at him with a mixture of surprise and carefully hidden admiration. Kabir walked out stiffly, jaw clenched, ignoring everyone. For someone like him, losing face in front of family and clients was like being punched in the gut. He could have gone home, cooled down, thought about his mistakes, but ego rarely takes the long road. That night, when most of the office lights had gone off and the building's parking lot echoed slightly with the beeping of reversing trucks and the distant honk of the highway, Ayan walked towards the bike rack with his backpack slung over one shoulder. The humid Mumbai air stuck to his skin. And his brain was still replaying the meeting. Every expression, every word. He almost didn't notice the footsteps behind him until they were too close to be casual. You enjoyed your little hero moment today. Nah? Kabir's voice cut through the dim light. Colder than the night breeze. Ayan turned to see him standing there with Vikram and Samar flanking him like backup dancers in a very bad music video. Vikram's pride was still bruised from the warehouse incident. Samar's eyes held that nervous excitement of someone who wants drama as long as it doesn't touch him. Sir, I was only honest, Ayan said quietly. They asked. I answered. That's all. Kabir took a step closer. Close enough for Ayan to see the small tremor in his jaw. You think I don't know what you did? He hissed. You made me look like a fool in front of my own chacha. You think this company will suddenly become yours because you know some code? His words were hot, but underneath there was an almost childlike panic, the panic of a man who had always believed his surname was enough. Now realizing it might not be. Vikram moved first, of course. Men like him always need to prove something with their hands. He reached out to shove Ayan. Maybe grab his collar again. Maybe just remind everyone who was physically stronger. But just like in the warehouse, Ayan's body reacted before his fear could. He stepped slightly to the side. Caught Vikram's arm not with aggression but with precision. Turned his wrist just enough to break his balance. Not his bones. Vikram's own momentum sent him stumbling into a parked scooter. The handlebar dug into his ribs and he let out a curse. More from embarrassment than pain. Samar took one uncertain step forward and then froze. Suddenly very aware of the CCTV camera above them. Its little red light blinking like an unblinking eye. Kabir, furious now, swung a wild punch at Ayan's face. It wasn't the clean, trained hit of a boxer. It was the desperate swing of a man who feels his world slipping. Ayan tilted his head, feeling the air move past his cheek. Caught Kabir's forearm gently but firmly. And used the smallest twist of his hips to guide that force away from himself. Kabir's polished shoes slid on the slightly oily concrete. And before he knew it, he was on his knees. One hand on the ground. The other still in Ayan's light grip. For a brief second, their eyes met, one pair wide with shock and rage. The other calm, almost tired. Ayan let go immediately and took a small step back. He could have said 100 things in that moment. He could have thrown back every insult, every joke, every village boy line. Instead, he chose just one sentence. Spoken softly enough that only the three of them and the CCTV microphone could catch it. You're not dangerous enough for me to be afraid of. Kabir sir, he said, but you are dangerous enough to people who can't stand up to you. That is the only reason I am here. Then he turned, picked up his backpack from where it had slipped off his shoulder. And walked away, leaving Kabir kneeling in a parking lot that suddenly felt much smaller than his ego. Later, when HR and the board would watch the footage, they would see an intern who never threw a punch, only defended himself, and a manager who attacked twice and fell twice because of his own force. But that is part 4 of the story. In that moment, under the buzzing tube light and the blinking CCTV, it was just one simple truth playing out, for the first time in his life. Kabir Khanna was not the one deciding who walks with their head high and who walks with it bowed. The thing about truth is, in Indian offices it doesn't explode like a bomb. It seeps in like chai on a white shirt, slowly, stain by stain, until everyone can see it, even if they pretend not to. 2 days after the parking lot incident, HR sent out one of those polite emails that always hide something serious. All operational staff requested to cooperate with an internal review. People started whispering near the coffee machine. Some said the client had complained. Some said the tender was cancelled. Some blamed that intern who doesn't know his aukat. Ayan kept his head down. But inside his stomach was in knots. He hadn't seen Kabir since that night. His cabin door stayed closed. Blinds half drawn, like a movie villain hiding between scenes. Then one afternoon, Ayan was called to the boardroom again. But this time there were no clients. No snacks, just the founder, the HR head, and the humming AC that always made the room too cold. On the screen, paused at a grainy frame, was the parking lot footage. We just want you to confirm this is the night in question. HR said, voice careful, like walking on glass. Ayan watched his tiny self on the TV. Backpack on one shoulder. Watched Kabir and Vikram closing in. Watched the shove, the stumble, the way he moved out of the way and guided their own force back at them. It was strange seeing his own body from outside. He looked calmer than he had felt. Yes, ma'am, he said quietly. That's the same night. Nobody shouted at him. Nobody accused him. Instead, the founder pressed pause, leaned back, and let out a long, tired sigh, the kind that seems to come from the soles of the feet. You know, beta, he said, not looking at anyone in particular. I started this company sitting next to drivers in the cabin, sharing one bottle of Limca and one packet of Parle-G for dinner. I never imagined that one day, in my own parking lot, my nephew would be the one raising his hand first. There was no big dramatic firing scene like in TV serials. That's not how real Indian families work, especially when business and blood are mixed. What happened instead was a series of quiet conversations behind closed doors. A lot of red eyes. And a short, stiff email a week later, effective immediately. Mr. Kabir Khanna will be stepping down from his role as head of operations. The official reason mentioned, personal reasons, and restructuring, of course. People gossiped anyway. Some said he'd been unfairly targeted. Some secretly enjoyed the fall of Prince Khanna. Others just shrugged and went back to their spreadsheets. Vikram was put on unpaid leave for a month, pending behavioral training, and Samar was moved to a role where he had less power over people and more responsibility for actual work. On paper, it all looked very professional. But if you stood near the glass railing on the 5th floor and watched the way people's eyes changed when Kabir walked past in those last few days, no longer rushing to greet him, no longer adjusting their posture to impress, you could feel the real punishment. For the first time in his life, he was not the center of the room. And that hurt in a way no HR letter could touch. The strange thing is, while all this was happening, Ayan was fighting his own quieter battle. HR offered him a permanent role faster than he'd ever imagined. We would like to bring you on as a full-time data scientist, they said, mentioning a salary number that would make a huge difference back in Gorakhpur. His mother cried on call when he told her. His father just said, Dekha, maine bola tha na, ring ho ya office. But at night, lying on his thin mattress in the PG, staring at the ceiling fan making lazy circles, Ayan felt uneasy. He hadn't come to Mumbai dreaming of power. But now, whether he liked it or not, he had it. The board listened when he spoke. The client insisted on his involvement. Drivers nodded at him with respect. He could so easily become the next person whose voice weighed more than others, whose word could quietly decide if someone kept their job. The thought scared him. He remembered Malik uncle's message, Satish bhai's tired laugh, the way everyone in the warehouse would go silent when a sir entered. Was he just going to move from one side of that silence to the other? Or could he do something to change the silence itself? When the founder called him again to discuss your future here, Ayan did something most interns would never dare. He came with his own conditions. Not arrogant demands, but a simple handwritten list in his notebook. He sat across from the old man, who now looked less like a company head and more like a tired father who had just discovered his son had been bullying other kids. Sir, Ayan began, voice steady, I am grateful for the offer. Truly, but if you want me to stay, it can't only be to optimize numbers on a screen. I want us to change how we treat the people who move those numbers in real life. The founder frowned slightly, curious. What do you mean? Ayan flipped open his notebook, showing notes in Hindi and English. Scribbles from the warehouse. We should start a proper training program for drivers and warehouse staff, he said. Not just safety videos. Teach them what these dashboards mean, how rude decisions are made. Get their input before we finalize. Give them a way to flag unrealistic schedules without being scared. Half our delays are because we don't listen to the people who actually sit in traffic. HR shifted in her chair, half impressed, half worried about budgets. The founder looked at the notes, then at Ayan's face. In that moment, he wasn't looking at a scholarship case or a coding genius. He was looking at the boy he probably once was, Sitting in a truck cabin. Hearing drivers' stories. Feeling the gap between the office and the road. "You are asking for something expensive," he said slowly. "Not just money-wise. Culture-wise. Many people won't like drivers walking into meeting rooms, giving opinions." Ayan smiled faintly. "Sir, they already give opinions. Right now they just do it over chai at the dhaba. We only hear about it when a truck is 3 hours late and someone shouts. If we bring those conversations into the system, we save money and face. Otherwise, we keep paying for our own arrogance." It was a bold thing to say to the man whose name was on the company gate. But instead of getting angry, the founder chuckled softly. "You talk too much for an intern, Mishra," he said. "Good. This company has had enough of people who only know how to talk down." He closed the notebook gently. "Fine. We'll pilot your program. You'll design it. You happy now?" Ayan shook his head. "Not happy, sir. Just less worried." Walking back to his desk, he realized something important. The real consequence of everything that had happened wasn't that Kabir lost his title or that Ayan got a new one. The real consequence was that the unwritten rule of Shakti line had been edited. It was no longer just, "Khanas decide, others obey." It was, at least a little bit, "Those who understand the work get a say, no matter their surname." And that was bigger than any one promotion or punishment. A few months later, if you walked into Shakti line without knowing any of this history, you probably wouldn't feel some big dramatic change in the air. The same trucks would still be lining up at the loading bay. The same smell of diesel and dust. The same shouting of, "Arre! Jaldi karo!" echoing off the walls. But if you watched closely, if you stood there with a cup of cutting chai in your hand the way Ayan often did now, you'd notice small things that didn't exist before. You'd see drivers sitting in a glass meeting room once a week. Not to be scolded but to sit beside Ayan and a projector, pointing at routes on the screen and arguing, "Ye wala road mat dalo." There's always a tempo stop there after 7 p.m. While Ayan laughed and said, "Theek hai bhai, we'll teach the system that." You'd see warehouse boys raising their hands during sessions, asking, "Sir, अगर ये ट्रक लेट हो गया तो हम सिस्टम में कैसे डालें? पहले तो बस गाली पड़ती थी." And you'd see Ayan replying, "No more gali for being honest. We want truth, not perfect numbers." It wasn't a revolution with banners and slogans. It was a slow, daily correction of how Izzat was distributed in that building. Not just upwards, but sideways and down. For Ayan, this new life felt almost unreal sometimes. He still sat at the same desk near the window. Still carried the same old backpack. Still ate simple dal chawal from his tiffin most days. But when he walked through the warehouse now, men who once avoided eye contact would call out, "Ayan sir, aaj ka route dekh lo zara," with a kind of affection that doesn't come from job titles. His mother had started sending photos of the half-built second floor back home. His salary was not just numbers on a slip. It was fresh paint on cracked walls. New books for a younger cousin. A slightly better life spreading quietly through narrow lanes in Gorakhpur. His father, the man who once wrapped his broken hand in a cheap bandage and pretended it didn't hurt, would sometimes end their calls with, "Proud of you, champ," then quickly change the topic to cricket score so his voice wouldn't shake. One evening, as the sun slid down behind the crowded Mumbai skyline and the office emptied out, Ayan checked his email one last time before shutting his laptop. Among the usual system alerts and meeting reminders, there was a short message from an address he recognized immediately. The subject line was just, "About that night." He hesitated, then clicked. The mail was only a few lines. "I was wrong about you. And about what strength means. I'm still angry, mostly at myself, but I'm trying to learn. I've joined a smaller firm. No big cabin, no special parking. For the first time I have to prove myself without my surname. It's humbling. I don't expect forgiveness. I just didn't want the last thing between us to be that parking lot." Kabir. Ayan leaned back in his chair, staring at the screen. There was a time he would have dreamed of this moment. Imagined some dramatic apology on his knees. But reading these simple, awkward sentences, he didn't feel triumph. He just felt lighter. He replied with one line, "I'm also still learning. Sir, I just hope both of us use our strength differently from now on." Then he closed his laptop, picked up his bag, and walked out. No victory dance, no heroic background music, just a young man catching a crowded local train home like millions of others. Except his shoulders were not as heavy as they used to be. You know, in a country like ours where your last name, your college, your English, even your pin code can decide whether people pour you chai or make you feel small. Ayan's story is not some fairy tale. It's a reminder that being underestimated can either break you or quietly build you into someone unshakable. A reminder that real power is not how many people lower their eyes when you enter a room, but how many people can finally look up because you stopped using your position to push them down. Maybe you see yourself in Ayan, the one who was told, "Tu yahan ke liye nahi bana," but still showed up every day. Or maybe, if you're honest, there's a little bit of Kabir in you, that part that enjoys having the upper hand, that uses jokes as a way to keep others in their place. Only you know which one feels closer. The question is not whether life will give you strength, at some point. In some form, it will, a promotion, a degree, money, even just louder words. The real question, the one Ayan had to answer in that parking lot and in that boardroom, is, when it's your turn to hold power, will people breathe easier when you walk in? Or will they go quiet out of fear? Because in the end, the world may forget your job title, your fancy projects, your LinkedIn posts, but it never forgets how safe or small you made people feel when you had the chance to choose. In the end, Ayan's story is not really about a big company or a clever algorithm. It is about what happens when ordinary people decide that silent suffering is no longer an option. Many of us in India have seen versions of this, in offices, in families, in small towns and big cities, where some people are made to feel small because of their accent, their hometown, their caste, their color, or simply because they don't belong to the right circle. We learn to keep our heads down, to accept unfairness as normal, to tell ourselves, "Chalta hai, life hai." But this story reminds us that "Chalta hai" can slowly destroy our self-respect. Ayan does not fight to become a hero. He first tries to stay quiet, to avoid trouble. Only when he realizes that his silence is protecting the bully, not the victims, does he speak and stand his ground. He proves that real strength is not humiliating others, but knowing when to say enough without losing your humanity. Kabir's fall also carries a gentle warning. When power is built on fear and ego, it may look strong for a while, but as our elders say, you reap what you sow. One day, the mask slips. For those of us who are older, who have lived through many hierarchies and injustices, this story invites a soft but honest question. In my own circle, am I more like Ayan or more like Kabir? Do people breathe easier when I enter the room? Or do they become smaller? True gold fears no fire. If our respect is genuine, it will survive being questioned. If this story touched something in you, I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever faced a similar silence, or broken it for someone else? If the message spoke to you, please like the video, share it with someone who needs courage today, and subscribe so you don't miss the next story where we explore the messy, beautiful truth of human dignity. May your days ahead be a little calmer, your heart a little lighter, and may you always find the courage to stand straight, even when the world tries to bend you.